As was stated earlier, we have some elected officials here, and they have agreed to speak. So our next speaker is Senator Jimmy Higbee.
Thank you. What an honor it is to be here tonight. Tom Fitzgerald touched on a lot of the things that I was going to talk about. And we're going to go back and talk about the special session. It's August the 19th. Only the governor can add something to the special session. He sets the groundwork for the special session. So only the governor can do that. And so that's we'll make sure that you understand. Only the governor. He has sole power over what we do in a special session. Now we're in regular session. The General Assembly has the authority to determine what we're going to talk about. But the special session, it's the governor's. It's his call. Eminent domain, and Tom touched on that, and most of you understand what eminent domain is. Eminent domain is to be used by the local government, state governments, when they're working on projects that are for the public good. And eminent domain is one of those tools that we don't want to get it out and use it very often. It's a painful process, and we should never be taking someone's land, but occasionally you have to do it in government for the public good. Not very often. Use it very sparingly, because we're dealing with private property owners, and we should value their ownership of that land. With that said, Tom also talked about the Kelo case back in 2005 before the U.S. Supreme Court, where a small community, I think in Connecticut, a local government, there was a private development, so a local government condemned a piece of property for this private development. And so the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court looked at it and says, yeah, you can do that. Under Connecticut law, that was perfectly legal. There was nothing that says you couldn't do that. So states across the country and Kentucky started looking at their eminent domain laws. Kentucky's was pretty good to start with, but we tweaked it some to make it even stronger to protect the rights of property owners. And I can tell you in 2006, we passed House Bill 308, I think it was. I can tell you that, and as Tom says, there's we didn't, these pipelines of sorts weren't on the radar screen then. And there's probably some loopholes in this bill, but I can tell you the legislative intent in 2006 was that nobody could use eminent domain for a private, for-profit company. Only for the public good could you use eminent domain. That was a legislative intent. Now I'm sure this case will, if eminent domain is tried in this case, it will end up in court, and hopefully the court will hold up the legislative intent that protects private property owners. Now, with that said, what am I doing about it? Most of you know Brad Metcalf, who works with us in the state senate. We're working. We have staff working on gathering information about this project. We're working with the Council of State Governments, CSG, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. These pipelines have been done in other places. We want to find out what are the issues, what were the problems, was eminent domain used. We want to find out all that information. It'll take some time to get it together, and we'll have a report for you when we do get that information together. We also have a committee meeting in Frankfurt. The Natural Resources Committee will be meeting soon, and this issue will be on the docket to talk about oversight of these type of projects. But I know Tom's done a lot of good work, and thank you, Tom, and But that's basically what I have to add. I know that it's been a long night, and I won't say more, because that's primarily what I want to say is the eminent domain. And I'm very interested to make, I can assure you what the legislative intent was, is that eminent domain could not be used in a situation like this. Thank you all.
What does the state of Kentucky, look to gain by allowing this through the state?
That's what I want to know.
You know, that would be something that makes them feel like Kentucky's a plausible place to come. What does the state of Kentucky
So
see?
what's the benefit?
I don't know that there's any rules that we have. This is a new animal. And I don't know that we have any type of oversight on this particular project. As Tom said, and he's very astute on these issues, and so that's why we were talking about these meetings in Frankfurt, getting information, but there's nothing in Kentucky law as we speak that prevents this pipeline from
Not
coming.
asking that. Is there something offered to the state of Kentucky to allow us to go?
No.
Yeah, what are we getting out of it? I mean, we've
Yes.
heard a lot about risk, but
I think the local taxes.
They're subject to ad valorem and property taxes. Just as an example, and this is one Judge and I were talking about a little earlier, Marathon has an oil pipeline through the county here.
Right.
It's 12 foot deep in the ground. Been there for years, has not had a problem. Oil pipelines are not NGL pipelines, and it's apples and oranges. But they paid, based on the assessed value of the property that runs through, I think they paid about $1,000 a mile.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, is that about right?
$25,000.
$25,000, and it's about 25 miles. So if you assume that same valuation would be about right for this new pipeline, and the assessed value would, the assessment would be the same, you're looking at about $35,000, because if it's $1,000 per mile.
That's in the property.
That would be in the property taxes that would be divided to the county, the schools, the library, whatever.
See, that's the New Jersey case they've been talking about. That was all about the property tax.
Right, and so, but that would be, they
It was
would,
for the public good.
Yeah.
So,
No amount of money's worth
then,
it.
that wouldn't go very far if we had a
talking about
disaster.
minutes ago,
No
saying,
amount of money is
this
worth
is
it.
great. They could make the public good.
well, the argument about whether something is for the public good is not what the condemnation hinges on. It's whether the easement itself is for public use. And so there's some questions that still need to be researched. This is a pipeline that begins outside the state and ends outside the state. It's not one that is using Kentucky products. It's not one that's delivering Kentucky products. So it's different than, for example, a gathering line from East Kentucky that is tied into a transmission line that sells to Hardin County. So there's some unanswered questions, but in terms, I don't know that they have to give the state a thing. It's just that these natural gas liquids used to just be flared off. They weren't considered to be valuable. And the ethane, which is about 60% of what comes out, used to go with the methane, used to go with the natural gas, and the rest of the stuff is just burned off. Now they've recognized the value of it, and they're trying to put in place the infrastructure to get it from point A to point B. And so there's no rhyme or reason to why the methane part of natural gas is subject to advanced review, and the other components, because they're regulated under the Interstate Commerce Act, aren't. But it raises a real loophole.
Well, let me ask a different question. What is the state of Kentucky doing to stop this instead of leaving it to individuals to try and stop it?
At this point in time, I'm not aware that the state is doing anything. That's why the governor needs to hear from folks to put this on the call so that the legislators can give the state the tools in order to require some accountability.
yeah,
Right now,
because
you don't have the legal tools.
No, the only other level of accountability that you could possibly look to is every county with planning and zoning has the ability to restrict the location of pipelines in order to keep them away from incompatible
Well,
uses.
representatives have nothing, they have no...
They can't do anything
recourse to make
until January. The governors, when you have a special call, which is a session, that is called specifically in between the annual sessions. We've already been through our annual session for this
But we're
year.
allowed
No, the governor has the ability. He's already called the session. They're already going to be in town in August, a little bit over a month. He could very easily put it on the call, say, I want you to consider this. He's already going to have to include something else because Toyota needs another exit off the interstate. So he's already going to add that. There's no reason why he shouldn't be adding this, but he just needs to hear from you all. He needs to hear from the magistrates, from the county judge, and from all of you that we want somebody to be minding the store and somebody to be looking at these risks, at these concerns, because
What's the best way to do that?
you can just call them, or you can. It's 564.
611.
Was it 2611? And he has a web page. You could just send him an email. But I would also contact your state senator, state representative, and they already know. They already know it's a concern. So you've already done that. And thank them both for being here. But they can
We need
put
to
in.
move on. We got.
Sorry, they can put in that word too.
Get through by our appointed time, and our next speaker is Representative David Ford.
Thank you, Mary Ann, for the invitation. It's real good to be here. You know, natural gas, liquid natural gas is coming through Kentucky. I don't know if it's going to be in a rail car or in a truck or in a pipeline, but it's going to be coming through. It's going to get from its point of production to its point of processing. So it's going to come, and in some way. You know, like Tom or somebody was mentioning, we already do have transmission lines for crude oil right now, and we got natural gas lines through the county as well. So it's not like it's never been done before. But if they were trying to ask me if they wanted to go through my land, well, I'd say no. There's no way. I don't know how they could pay me enough money for the permanent use of my land for this purpose. But it's not my land. It's your land. It's somebody else's land. And so you have your way of dealing with it. Now, there are some public health issues that have been raised, and they're very valid. Jimmy talked about how in 2006 we strengthened eminent domain. And eminent domain was, I wrote a column about it back when this Hilo versus New London. And yeah, we did. We strengthened it quite a lot here, in my opinion. And that strength was to say that it's not up to you, local government officials, whether or not something is for the public good. It's got to be for public use. And that's a very important distinction. But I'm not a lawyer. And to my knowledge, my belief is that the only people who are going to be happy out of all this is the attorneys, because there's going to be a whole lot of people in court represented by attorneys, and you do need to be represented by an attorney when this time comes. What you need to understand is that Jimmy and I, the General Assembly cannot forbid this, and we cannot approve it. We have nothing to do with it. But I think that the best thing that can be done, because there's people who want this, and there's people who do not want it. But for both of them, the best thing that could happen is that the governor adds this to the call, so that a regulatory agency within Kentucky has some oversight, has some way to review that which is planned. He will add that to the call if the group that visits your website and every one of you call up and say, just add it to the call. Just add that authority to an existing board. Nothing, no money needs to be spent, no new agency needs to be created. Just add it to the call when we meet on August 19th. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to get done, because you still have to get approval in both the House and the Senate. But if you add it to the call, it can get done and enacted into law after the governor signs the bill. Now, we can, when we reconvene in January, we can do it then. I don't know if that's too late. But I don't know if I trust the court at this time to interpret any lawsuit in the way that, as Senator Higgins said, was our intent. We don't want somebody using private land for private companies under the guise of public good. It's got to be public use. And there's people who can stretch this into a public use, although I think you mentioned that this may not be for America, that this may be processed and sent home. It's been a long evening. I told Sherry I'd be home for supper about 7:30, but Jimmy and I are going to stay for whatever questions and other speakers there may be. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. They only have one speaker signed up to speak, and that's Pat Swartz.
My name is Pat Swartz. We chose Bardstown to retire to, and we've been here a couple of years. You all touched on almost everything that I was going to talk about because we've lived in Texas and we've lived in Oklahoma. We have experience with these people. They will challenge the eminent domain, I can guarantee you that. I worked for an oil company for a number of years, and if there's big money in what they're going to do, and they want to make that money. So if they need resistance, if it gets down to brass tacks, they will challenge, so be prepared. I fought a drilling company for 2 years in Oklahoma. I wrote a million letters. I rode a broom for 2 years. And I won. I did. It was a turbocharge. And I won. Something that people haven't talked about, you all don't realize that this stuff doesn't move through the pipeline by itself. There have to be enormous compressors built. They make an ungodly amount of noise. You just can't imagine. So I don't know where they're going to put them. Usually they put them every 40 miles or every 60 miles. But this stuff is really thick. So, and the natural gas line in my yard, which goes in front of my property, is a 24-inch main. It's under 450 pounds of pressure. So I don't know how much pressure they're going to put in this line to make it move. 1,441. Thank you. That's a lot of pressure. So if they're going to get that pipeline through your property, the only thing I just encourage you to do, ask about the compressors. If you're going to be in your property, in your contract, make sure you put, well, okay, if I can only hear birds singing now, after this thing is in, I'm the one to hear birds singing then. Because there are sound blankets and remediation. They don't like to use them because they're expensive. But you really need to think about that if it does cross your property. And there is a list out. I know that this is more than just this pipeline that we're going to probably get. There is a 32-page list of all the pipeline breaks, ruptures, blowouts since the year 2000. That's a lot of oil and gas and chemicals being spread around everywhere. And Williams was involved in a lot of them. I used to work for an oil company, and I know Williams Company quite well. That's it.